The stars should have been silent that night. Instead, the void burned with fire. Across the shattered front, fleets that had never known defeat collapsed under the weight of their own arrogance. Alien admirals spoke in hushed disbelief, their battle lines breaking apart, their strategies crumbling in the face of something they could not understand. Humanity had no empire, no ancient bloodline of rulers, no fleets built over millennia. We had only grit, only fury, only the stubborn refusal to kneel. And in the moment the Galactic Council broke the line, when their war machines bore down with the certainty of victory, one human stood in the breach. A soldier no council member had ever named, no enemy had ever feared. What followed was not strategy, not chance. It was something older, something they had never believed possible. The galaxy would learn that when humanity is cornered, we do not surrender. We answer. But the question remains, would the galaxy survive humanity's fury once unleashed? The war had not yet touched Jonas Hale's corner of Earth, at least not directly. The skies above his mountain town still glowed with familiar constellations, unbroken by the sight of burning wrecks or alien patrols. The river still ran clear, carrying the spring meltdown from the high ridges, and the people still gathered at dusk to share meals under the warmth of lantern light. But Jonas could feel it. Just beyond the horizon, the galaxy shifted, and the storm pressed closer every day. He had been a soldier once, years ago, before the Council declared humanity a containment risk. He had worn the uniform proudly, not for empire, not for conquest, but for the belief that humans deserved a place among the stars. When the orders came down to dismantle the Terran fleet, Jonas walked away with nothing but a chest full of medals that no one dared display anymore. The Council's message had been clear. Humanity's fire burned too hot. We were to remain on our world, grounded, monitored, leashed. Now Jonas lived quietly, a mechanic tending old shuttles and teaching the younger ones how to keep their hands steady with tools. He spoke rarely of the wars he'd fought or the comrades he'd buried. But when the children asked why the Council forbade humans from building new ships, his silence was answer enough. Still, there was a peace to his days. His sister's children laughed in his workshop, oil streaking their hands. His town trusted him to fix what was broken, to steady what wavered. For a while, it seemed enough, until the night the beacons lit the skyway. From his porch, Jonas saw it, a bright scar cutting across the stars, followed by a tremor that rattled the valley. Not meteor, not natural. He knew the sound of war when it split the heavens. Hours later, word reached them. The Galactic Council had broken the line. An alien coalition had swept through the human defense cordons, annihilating fleets that had no chance to stand. Earth was not yet under siege, but the message was unmistakable. Containment had failed. Humanity was exposed. Jonas listened to the broadcast in silence, jaw tightening. He could hear the fear in every report, the way the Council's envoys demanded compliance even as their enemies carved through the border stars. It was always the same, rules for us, excuses for them. And in that moment, Jonas realized peace had only been borrowed time. The ordinary life he'd built was a fragile illusion, one the galaxy had chosen to shatter. The younger ones looked to him, eyes wide, searching for reassurance he could not give. They had grown up believing the Council kept them safe. Now the Council had failed, and humanity stood alone. That night, Jonas walked out into the fields beyond his home, the air sharp with pine and starlight. He looked up, fists clenched at his sides, and thought of the oaths he had once sworn. They had ordered him to lay down his arms. They had commanded humanity to remain small, obedient, silent. But the war had come anyway. And Jonas Hale knew, deep in the marrow of his bones, that the galaxy had made a mistake, for they had cornered humanity once more. And the last time the stars tried that, the ashes burned for centuries. Here's a rising action draft, approximately 1,500 words, right in the middle of the 1,200 to 1,800 range. It builds on Jonas Hale's setup, escalates tension, shows humanity cornered, and gives you cinematic beats for voiceover pacing. The Council had promised order, yet in the weeks after the line broke, all Jonas saw was chaos. Broadcasts painted fragments of the truth, shattered colonies along the rim, fleets driven into retreat, Entire sectors abandoned to the advancing enemy. The Council called them dissidents, a coalition of species who claimed the Council had overreached, taxed too heavily, ruled too harshly. But the messages smuggled to Earth told a darker tale. This was no mere rebellion. It was conquest. And humanity, caught between Council decrees and rebel fleets, stood exposed. Jonas sat in the old war room beneath his town's community hall, the maps glowing with red splotches spreading across the border stars. He hadn't worn a uniform in a decade, but the way the younger officers leaned toward him, the way they waited for his judgment, told him the truth. They remembered who he was, and they needed him. Council fleets are falling back, one of them reported, her voice shaking. They're consolidating around their core worlds. They're leaving the border systems to burn. Jonas stared at the display. He knew the Council's doctrine: protect the core at any cost. And Earth? Earth was a monitored frontier species. Disposable. Then they'll leave us to burn too, Jonas said quietly. A silence fell over the room. Outside, in the streets above, families huddled around lanterns as the power grids flickered under the weight of Council control. The younger ones still clung to the illusion that Earth was shielded by Council treaties. Jonas saw through it. Treaties were paper. Fire was real. When the enemy arrived, it was not with a fleet, but with whispers. First came the sabotage, orbital relays collapsing into silence, supply shipments rerouted, satellites cut from their networks. Then came the terror, broadcasts hijacked with images of burning colonies, messages demanding Earth renounce its ties to the Council or share the same fate. The Council's envoys responded with threats of their own: restrictions, sanctions, the promise of punishment if Earth faltered. And in the middle of it all, Jonas watched the world he loved teeter on the edge. The first strike hit Mars. Jonas listened to the feeds in the town square as the red world flared with explosions, orbital stations torn apart like toys. He could hear the screams of survivors carried across hacked frequencies before they were cut into static. When the children of his town saw him that night, they asked the question no adult dared voice. Uncle Jonas, who will protect us? His silence was answer enough. The next morning, Jonas convened the old veterans, men and women who had once served in the Terran fleet, who had bent to the Council's demands and laid down their arms. Their hair was gray now, their hands slower, but when Jonas asked if they would stand again, not one hesitated. They took our ships, Jonas said, pacing the dim hall. They dismantled our fleets, but they never took our minds, our hands, our will. A murmur of assent rippled through the room. We don't have dreadnoughts, he continued, but we have yards. We have old hulls buried in Council scrap. We have fuel, engineers, and we have something they have never understood. What's that? One of the younger veterans asked. Jonas's eyes hardened. The fury of a people they tried to leash. They began in secret. Workshops once used for farming equipment were repurposed to machine cannon barrels. Decommissioned shuttles were gutted and rebuilt with armor plating scavenged from derelicts. Children carried parts in the night, while veterans trained them in silence. Jonas himself crawled through the guts of a half-buried frigate, its bones rusting in a canyon since the Council's dismantling order. For days, sparks lit the cliffs as he and his crew rewired its reactors, coaxing life into a heart that had been forced to lie still. And then, one night, the frigate's lights flickered. Its systems purred. Against the orders of the galaxy's rulers, humanity's first warship in 10 years breathed again. Jonas ran a hand across its steel hull, whispering like a man greeting an old friend. You're awake again, and so are we. Word spread faster than Jonas had expected. Across Earth, old soldiers stirred, colonies whispered of resistance, and in the shadows of forgotten shipyards, other hulks roared back to life. The Council denounced them as criminals. The enemy swore they would reduce Earth to ash. Jonas stood in the breach between two powers, both demanding submission, and he chose neither. We fight for our own, he told his crew as they stood aboard the reborn frigate. Not for the Council, not for their enemies, for humanity. The oath was simple, but it spread like fire. The first battle came sooner than expected. A rebel cruiser slipped past the Council's retreating fleets. its guns set on Earth's orbital stations. Jonas's frigate met it above the stratosphere, patched-together hull groaning as it maneuvered into firing position. On the bridge, young recruits stared wide-eyed at the enemy ship, its sleek alien design glowing with deadly intent. Jonas's voice cut through their fear, calm and steady. "Listen to me. They've fought empires, they've fought species bred for war, but they've never fought us. Not like this. Hold steady." The enemy hailed, demanding surrender. Jonas answered with silence. Then, with a single command, he lit the sky. Railguns hammered. Missiles streaked from hidden ports. The alien cruiser staggered under the first volley, shields sparking, its elegant lines marred with fire. But the return fire was brutal. The frigate shuddered as plasma lanced across its hull, systems screaming. A console exploded, throwing sparks across the bridge. "Reactor's unstable," an engineer shouted. Jonas's jaw set. "Keep firing." They fought for hours, the patched-together frigate dancing with the predator designed for slaughter. Again and again, Jonas pushed his crew beyond their limits, improvising maneuvers, redirecting power, gambling with systems the Council had forbidden them from even touching. At last, as dawn broke over Earth's curve, the rebel cruiser faltered. Its core detonated in a blossom of light, scattering debris into the void. Silence hung over the bridge. Smoke curled. Men and women stared at Jonas, stunned. He exhaled slowly, his voice low. "That's one. There will be more." And more came. Each battle pushed them closer to the edge. Repurposed ships against fleets, farmers and machinists against trained warlords. Yet time and again, humanity endured. They improvised weapons from mining lasers, turned cargo haulers into rams, built networks the Council had sworn they were incapable of building. Word spread across the stars. Whispers of Earth's defiance reached rebel admirals and Council chambers alike. Some laughed, dismissing it as myth. Others trembled, remembering what humans had done in wars long past. But for Jonas and his crew, there was no time for legends. Only survival. And as the enemy's armadas grew, Jonas knew the day would come when one frigate, one fleet, one world would not be enough. The war was coming to Earth itself. That night, he stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars burn with distant battles. His reflection stared back, older, scarred, weary. He thought of the children who had asked who would protect them. He thought of the veterans who had placed their faith in him. He thought of the galaxy, arrogant and cruel, that had forced humanity to its knees one too many times. And he whispered into the void, a vow the stars would remember. "You wanted us silent. You wanted us broken. But you forgot what happens when you corner us, when you strike at what we love. You forgot who we are." He turned away, eyes hard with fire. "When the storm comes, we'll be ready, and you'll regret ever breaking the line." The day came when the stars above Earth burned with the glow of invasion. Not whispers, not sabotage, not a lone cruiser probing defenses. This was a fleet, 30 warships, their hulls gleaming like obsidian, engines roaring as they descended upon the blue world below. The rebel coalition had grown tired of Earth's defiance. They would end it here in one blow. Jonas stood on the bridge of the Resolute, the patched-together frigate that had become humanity's first warship reborn. The crew's faces were pale in the glow of tactical displays. Some were no older than his sister's children. None had known real war, but tonight they would. 30 ships, whispered the helmsman. "We've got, what, 7? 8, Jonas corrected, voice calm, even as fire churned in his chest. Around them floated the ragtag fleet of Earth, mining barges turned into missile platforms, cargo haulers bristling with railguns, frigates pieced together from forbidden yards. A fleet born not of council decree, but of desperation and fury. "Against 30? The helmsman asked. Jonas's gaze never wavered from the enemy icons burning across the screen. "Against 30. The first salvo lit the void. Plasma streaked across black, tearing through Earth's orbitals. Civilian stations burst apart, fire scattering into the silence. The enemy advanced, confident, inexorable. Jonas leaned forward. "Hold formation. Wait for my mark." His fleet obeyed. Engines thrummed, guns primed, but not one ship fired. On the comms, rebel captains taunted them, calls for surrender, jeers about humanity's defiance. Jonas listened in silence, hands clasped behind his back. His crew fidgeted, waiting, terrified. Then, as the first enemy line closed within range, Jonas spoke. Now! The void erupted. From behind the planet's shadow, hidden platforms came online. Old mining lasers, orbital cannons once stripped for parts, even experimental prototypes the Council had forbidden, all fired at once. The enemy's vanguard staggered, shields screaming under the sudden onslaught. Then Jonas's fleet surged forward. The Resolute led the charge, railguns blazing, missiles streaking through the dark. Cargo haulers rammed into cruisers twice their size, detonating in suicidal defiance. The rebel formation fractured, caught off guard by a species they had been told was broken. "Keep pressure," Jonas roared. "Hit them harder." But the enemy rallied. Plasma fire hammered into Earth's defenders. One by one, the makeshift ships of Jonas's fleet fell, torn apart, their crews buying seconds of survival for the rest. On the Resolute, alarms screamed. Hull plating buckled. A console exploded, showering sparks. Jonas staggered, caught himself, barked for status reports. "We've lost engines 2 and 3. Reactor containment unstable. Shields collapsing." "Keep firing," Jonas ordered, voice like iron. Through the smoke and chaos, the frigate clawed its way forward. Jonas's mind raced, every move calculated, every risk weighed. He diverted power from life support to weapons. He rerouted coolant from engines to shield arrays. He gambled with systems no sane commander would touch. And each gamble paid in fire. Another enemy cruiser broke apart. Another battleship faltered. The Resolute became a spear, bleeding, burning, but driving straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Then the flagship appeared, a Leviathan, bristling with weapons, shields burning with stolen power from conquered worlds. Its guns turned towards Earth itself, ready to deliver the killing blow. Jonas stared at it, jaw tight. This was the moment, the decision, the point where history would mark humanity as either broken or unbreakable. He turned to his crew. Their faces were smoke-stained, bloodied, terrified, and yet every eye was on him, waiting. He nodded once, move power to the main gun. "Captain, if we do that, we die," Jonas finished for them. "But Earth lives." "Do it!" The ship groaned as power surged. Lights flickered. Systems failed. The Resolute screamed like a wounded beast as its heart was forced to deliver one final strike. The enemy flagship's guns flared, plasma charging, light building like a false dawn. And in that same heartbeat, Jonas gave the order. "Fire!" The Resolute spat fury. A rail slug the size of a shuttle tore through the void, accelerated by the last strength of a dying reactor. It struck the enemy flagship head-on. For a moment, the universe held its breath. Then the Leviathan split apart, torn down its spine in a blossom of white fire. The explosion lit Earth's skies brighter than sunrise, casting shadows across the continents below. On the Resolute, silence reigned. Systems failed one by one. The ship drifted, dead in the water, its crew staring wide-eyed at the impossible victory. Jonas sank into his chair, chest heaving, smoke curling around him. His body ached with exhaustion. His ears rang with silence. But outside, the enemy fleet broke. Shock rippled through their ranks. Ships faltered, then fled, scattering into the void. The impossible had happened. Humanity had stood against 30 and endured. Yet as relief washed over the crew, Jonas knew the truth. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. He looked to Earth below, its cities burning with fear and hope alike. He thought of the Council, watching from their protected core worlds. He thought of the enemy, nursing their humiliation, already plotting revenge. And he whispered so softly only the broken hull seemed to hear. "You wanted us contained. You wanted us silent. But now the galaxy has heard us." His eyes closed. His final thought was not of war, but of the children who had once asked who would protect them. The answer was written across the stars in fire. The battlefield was silent, not the silence of peace, But the silence that comes after the storm has already taken everything it can. Wreckage drifted where fleets once burned. Stars reflected off shattered hulls, casting fragments of ships into glittering constellations that would never be named. The aliens called it a massacre. Humanity called it survival. On the command deck of the Resolute Dawn, Captain Elias sat slumped in his chair, uniform torn, hands raw from the fight. His crew worked in hushed tones, patching systems, dragging wounded comrades from collapsed bulkheads. There was no cheering, no triumphant victory cry, just exhaustion, just the awareness of what they had endured. Across the commnet, fragments of alien voices echoed, disbelief, grief, fear. Entire empires that had once mocked humanity's fragility were whispering a different word now. Indomitable. Elias rose, his body aching as if the weight of every fallen soldier pressed down on his shoulders. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars, the same stars his ancestors had seen from the dirt of Earth before humanity had even dreamed of ships. "We held," he whispered. The words weren't for his crew. They weren't even for the dead. They were for the galaxy itself, a message to every power that thought humanity could be broken. We held, and we will again. Behind him, the ship's AI flickered to life, its voice strained but steady. "Captain, priority message. Multiple channels. The galaxy wants to talk." Elias gave a grim smile. They had seen. They had all seen. The Zereth Dominion, whose fleets had never before tasted defeat. The Koresh theocracy, who had called humanity faithless scavengers. Even the Valen Syndicate, who once bought and sold human slaves like commodities. Now they watched a single, battered Terran fleet standing amidst the ruins of their combined armada. For the first time in galactic memory, humanity was not dismissed, not ignored, not underestimated. The price had been unbearable. Thousands lost, worlds scarred, names that would never be spoken outside of family whispers. And yet, that sacrifice had purchased something no weapon could forge: respect, fear, hope. Across scattered colonies, human children would grow up knowing this night. Not as the night Earth nearly fell, but as the night humanity refused to bow. Songs would be written, stories told, statues raised in places where oxygen was scarce and stone was imported at impossible cost. Because some memories are worth preserving in more than words. Elias closed his eyes, hearing the whispers of the dead in the silence. He wondered if history would remember his name, or if he would be just another forgotten soldier swallowed by the void. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the galaxy would remember us. And somewhere in the depths of space, alien leaders asked themselves the questions they had once laughed at. What happens if humanity stops fighting to survive and starts fighting to win? The answer, Elias thought, would shape the next 1,000 years. His ship shuddered as engines reignited, carrying the survivors home. Lights flickered, broken panels sparked, but they were still moving, still alive, still human. On the horizon of stars, a new era began. Not of conquest, not of empire, but of undeniable presence. Humanity, the youngest species at the table, had claimed a seat not through diplomacy or favor, but through fire. The galaxy had witnessed what one fragile world could produce when cornered, and they would never forget, because in the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about defiance, about love for the homeworld, about the stubborn refusal to vanish into silence. And as long as one human heart still beat beneath the stars, the galaxy would never be safe from us.